Hello, everyone. I hope you can stay for the last session of the year of today's edition and also the last session of this year. I am joined by a group of professionals, and I look forward to learning more about social innovation, sustainability, blockchain. Marek, you'll be moderating the session. So the stage is yours.
Hello, everybody. Welcome once again to the last and the closing session of this wonderful European blockchain convention. Today, I have the pleasure to moderate this last panel on sustainability, which has been one of the cornerstones of this conference this year. And we've had some really great sessions earlier during previous days. Related to green bonds, circular economy, corporate metaverse, and supply chains. And today we are closing this conference with a panel dedicated to sustainability, social innovation, and anything really related to sustainable development goals and how blockchain can empower implementation of those. And I have three great speakers here today. So I will allow you to introduce yourself and welcome to the panel, Marta, Wes, and Simone. And please, if you could say just a few words about yourself, who you are, or what kind of company you represent, what's your professional background, so that the audience can be more familiar with you. Marta, can you please start?
Sure thing, and apologies for not being on video. My laptop just decided to randomly do everything possible, and for the last 45 minutes is not interested in connecting to internet. But if you want to know how I look like, my LinkedIn photo is fairly accurate. Also, there are a bunch of recordings of me on the internet. My role is, in general, anything that has to do with community building and just general decentralized autonomous organization design. So I work with startups and with companies and communities, most importantly, to help them grow, design contribution pathways and other opportunities to create ecosystems. I've been around for quite a long time, did a bunch of work with open source communities and projects like the Linux Foundation and Hyperledger, where I was director of ecosystem for 5 years. And currently I'm working with various quite interesting startups in the DeFi space.
Yeah, thank you. Wes, can you continue?
Hey, everyone. And Marek, thank you for having me. It's been a fantastic conference and very excited to discuss different sustainable opportunities as well as sustainable development goals on this panel and some of the opportunities that we have to build as an ecosystem. Again, my name is Wes Geisenberger. I'm the VP of ESG and Sustainability at the HBAR Foundation. The HBAR Foundation is an organization meant to grow the Hedera community and drive adoption of Hedera Hashgraph, which is an enterprise public network that focuses on all sorts of different use cases, everything from gaming to DeFi to sustainability. And the HBAR Foundation was actually created through a grant that Hedera ecosystem had for basically funding for ecosystem growth. And that grant at the time was for 5 billion USD when it was allocated, and a large portion of that went to the HBAR Foundation, and a large portion of that is focused on sustainability. It's one of the main goals of the foundation, and what we're doing is looking to drive adoption of the Hedera network for things like carbon offsets, for carbon emissions measurement, and creating markets to facilitate transactions of netting those processes out. But it's not just in the carbon markets; it's looking at everything from supporting natural world use cases, supporting different social equality use cases, or things like water rights. And we're building out all of these use cases and applications on Hedera through this fund. And we're working with grantees who want to come and apply to the HBAR Foundation, which I encourage many of you to do, to go to hbarfoundation.org and apply. And what we're doing is we're evaluating different ways that we can apply funding to grow the adoption of the network to support all these great entrepreneurs out there, all these great folks who want to participate in the community and build on distributed ledger technologies like Hedera, and making that really easy to consume. And so my background, personally is I spent a couple of years at Hedera from open access when the network was available for anyone to use, all the way through earlier this year when I jumped over to the HBAR Foundation to continue that goal of driving adoption of Hedera. And before that, I spent about 6 years at Oracle, focusing on a lot of different emerging technologies and public benefit use cases. Yeah.
Wonderful, thank you. And Simone?
Yeah, hi everybody. And like Wes said before, thanks a lot for having me, for inviting me, Marek. I'm Simone Accornero. I'm the CEO and co-founder of FlexiDAO. FlexiDAO is a clean tech startup specifically in the energy sector, based in Amsterdam, Netherlands, and Barcelona, Spain. Myself, I'm an energy engineer as background, so all my background and previous experience has been in the energy sector, with focusing on energy markets, but also energy management for companies, for SMEs and also large companies. And I got closer to blockchain around 2016 when I was working as research engineer at the University of KU Leuven in Belgium, where we were studying blockchain indeed for the application in the energy sector. And then here we are today. My company is FlexiDAO. Essentially what we do is that we sell and provide large companies software as a service solution to help them manage and monitor their carbon-free energy sourcing in a nutshell. Most likely we'll explain later, but carbon sourcing clean energy is actually quite complex, because how do you actually prove that an electron is green or gray? That's basically impossible. Well, it's impossible, physically impossible. That's why there's actually a market of environmental commodities that sits on the side of the power market where companies buy and sell electricity. And this parallel market of environmental commodities, it's where companies and energy suppliers use and trade these certificates to prove eventually that you're consuming carbon-free energy. And this system, we believe, it's pretty updated. So actually, our long-term vision of our company is really to create the 21st century generation of these environmental commodities. And that's our vision, and that's what I will bring a bit into this panel. So blockchain for environmental commodities, very focused on the energy sector.
Yeah, very interesting. I represent IKEA. I'm the moderator in this panel, but on my daily basis, I work for a new business unit at IKEA called New Retail Business, specifically for the team called Clean Energy Services. And blockchain is one of the technologies that I support internally at IKEA. Therefore, I have also been involved with European Blockchain Convention for 2 years now. And let's kick it off. So first of all, topic of sustainability is really a broad one and an important one, and I think close to many people's hearts. So where I wanted to kick it off is actually with sustainable development goals that are quite commonly known by now. There are several of them, and a lot of corporations are referring to them in their own strategies. So I was wondering, if you look at these sustainable development goals, which one do you think are closest to where you are today with regards to implementing distributed ledger technology in making them come true? And maybe Marta, I'll start with you. I'm really curious to hear your perspective on that.
Sure, thank you. So I think that one of the biggest, or my biggest focus right now, given that I work also with the Sovrin Foundation, is bringing identity to the 3.7 billion people in the world who do not have any identity, and that's why they are also and don't get any social benefits. They can't get any political discussions. They also are they are nobodies. So I think that blockchain has an incredible opportunity to create an identity system that has nothing to do with paper, that has nothing to do with your country of origin, or who allows you to have an identity or not. It belongs to you as a human. Of course, there are a lot of issues with it when it comes to understanding cultures, understanding how can different governments agree to using a uniform identity system, and how can those systems be recognized in various countries. But ever since I joined the ID 2020 movement in New York, the United Nations, I think it was like 5 or 6 years ago, I strongly believe that there is a way for us to create an identity system that will be applicable to everyone in this world.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I think for us in the Western world, it's a little bit an abstract topic, not to have your own identity. But if you spend some time, in other developing countries, if you could travel to places, like Africa, India, and other, smaller, less developed parts of the world, you really start to understand the pain and the challenge these people go through. And maybe I could give the voice now to Simone and ask you which of the goals, sustainability development goals, feel closest to your heart and the work you're doing with FlexiDAO.
Yeah. I mean, I think that from my introduction, the answer is quite straightforward. It's definitely the number 7. So ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. So that's definitely our main focus. I think we also touch upon a couple of other ones like 9 and 13, but really 7 is our focus. And there we like the work that we're doing there, and why I believe that blockchain by the DLT is a very good technological fit. What needs to be achieved is that today, as I was saying before, the market of environmental commodities in the energy sector is outdated. It was set up around 25 years ago, when really the objective was to bring online as much wind, as much solar as possible. However, now we're in a situation in which we also need to start caring of when we consume. So the audience is not for sure energy savvy, but you can all relate to the fact that it's not always sunny, it's not always windy, and batteries are expensive. Society apparently doesn't like nuclear, and biomass is also geothermal is always not there. So it's very hard to have reliable, constant, renewable, carbon-free energy. So we need to find a way that can provide price signals, that can provide incentives to companies and consumers to actually consume when there's availability of renewable energy. And today, environmental commodities don't do that, because they are annual. They're an annual attribute. So it's worth for the entire year. So you can, and this happens today in the market, you can be in Spain, you can have a green tariff from any retailer you have, and they could be selling green energy to you. And what this means is they are buying a renewable certificate from Norway that was maybe produced from hydro in January or February, and you're consuming it in November. So there's really no correlation whatsoever to when and how the consumer consumes, and what kind of proof the supplier needs to provide in order to say to you that it's green and it's carbon free. So we want to change that. And it's called 24/7 carbon free energy movement. It's actually spearheaded by Google, Microsoft. The US federal government 2 days ago announced that it will be procuring 50% of its energy on a 24/7 carbon-free basis. So 24/7 means making sure that you're consuming carbon-free not once a year, not on an annual basis, but every hour, and that it needs to be local, it needs to flow to you. So this, of course, requires an absolute change in how you design these environmental commodities and how you trade them, how you implement them, how you claim them. So this is essentially the work that we do. And we strongly believe that fungible and non-fungible tokens are a perfect fit to do this, because you need to pinpoint in time and location a certain volume of renewable energy and assign attributes to it. What was the carbon content of the grid in that specific moment in time? So you really have the perfect technology to resolve the needs that is out there. How do I have a scalable infrastructure that can allow to trade and trace and have verifiable claims on all of these thousands and millions of data points? Because imagine just Europe, how massive the grid is and how many injection points there are and how many off-taking points there are. So this is essentially what we want to do at FlexiDAO, what we're doing. It's a big ecosystem. It's not only us. And I think it's very exciting, but also very challenging, because we are bringing blockchain to a sector that is many times very legacy oriented, very regulatory driven, where there are experts of energy, not many times of ICT, and definitely not of blockchain. So it's been challenging to reconcile the two things, but definitely very exciting. So we really hope that we can make a contribution to this to the goal number 7 when it comes to this topic.
Yeah, very clear vision, very inspiring. Thank you. And finally, Ves, I'm so happy to have you with us, because I mean, you do represent the technology layer. Hedera, which is a network built on Hashgraph consensus protocol, has a very clear role in this ecosystem, and you've been there for a while. And the foundation that you represent in the session today has also a clear goal. So where does it resonate with you and the work you are doing?
Thank you, Marek. Yeah, it really resonates on a lot of different goals, but you know, we've spent a lot of time focused on 7, 9, and 13, very similar to FlexiDAO, and making it easy to build in a way that measures actions against these goals. So very similar to FlexiDAO, we've created an open source model. It's actually called the Guardian. It's out there on GitHub. Folks can go experiment with this technology, and it's really agnostic of, say, a REC in the case of a megawatt hour measuring energy, or a financial byproduct of the energy, or a metric ton in the case of a carbon offset or a carbon emission. And it's taking a policy or a methodology that can be used really against any of these goals, and looking at the outcomes that we drive in a very transparent way, in a fully auditable way, and really using the benefits of a public ledger or a public blockchain. And our goal was to take some of these different UN Sustainable Development Goals and really focus on a good example that we could drive measurable outcomes and get the trust that blockchain provides at scale. And that's what Hedera is really good at. It's taking assets that could be tied to real world events, like assets coming from talking through the energy grid, maybe a solar inverter that talks every 5 seconds as an IoT device to the rest of the grid, or to a public network like Hedera's, and has its own set of public and private keys. Just like any individual who has a wallet would, these devices can have identities and wallets. It could even be an individual who's measuring something on a farm, or taking a picture and sending a hash to a public ledger to report as part of a methodology that adds up as part of a workflow to create an asset that's tradable. And the thing that we can do, whether it's with energy or carbon offsets, is give a path to share our progress against these goals, and to make it highly measurable in a completely decentralized process. And so whether it's working with the energy grid or creating a carbon offset or measuring emission, we have folks who are authorities. And today, you know, there's nonprofits that are registries for these RECs or offsets. And so they say, I'm going to organize this. I'm going to create a process and a methodology. And I'm going to have folks who go out and verify that maybe a farmer is measuring soil sequestered in a field, and all the documents are filled out. And following that same process, an auditor may come out and have another identity and attest that something may be true, until we add up a bunch of steps and get to a desirable outcome. And that's what Hedera is focused on, is enabling this for all the application builders, and creating the easy to use tools for those folks to build faster and achieve these UN Sustainable Development Goals faster. And so we see folks doing this a lot in this carbon offset or renewable energy credit space, as well as emissions measurement. But we do have folks measuring water rights as another example, or we have folks measuring supply chain data and giving farmers access to liquidity for providing that data. Good example is what Suku Omni is doing. If you go to suku.world, you can learn more about how they're enabling better access to financial opportunities for the farmers, but also providing better data. And those data points can be used for a multitude of these goals. And at the HBAR Foundation, we're providing partnerships for the goals and financial access to help achieve these outcomes. And so I do like to focus on 7, 9, and 13, but we focused on many of them. And I'd be happy to talk to anyone in the audience about how we can help achieve these goals and go into depth on any of them.
Oh, fascinating. And I think we've all seen that sustainability has grown to becoming actually a public debate right now. You see young people walking in the streets protesting about the old way of living and consuming this world. And I think it's much more than just corporate, motto. It's close to people's hearts, and I think we all need to move together to actually bring a change to this world. That's also where IKEA is very committed to, with our people and planet positive strategy, and we strongly see distributed ledger as one of the technologies that could be the backbone of more sustainable world, more fairer world. But then coming back to you, Marta, and interesting things you've said in the beginning about also identity, communities, individuals. I mean, you've had tremendous experience in this space, coming through one of the most interesting companies and projects out there. Such as Blockstream or Hyperledger. You've worked with different technologies. Now, looking back, through all those years you've been in the space, is there anything you think is worth mentioning in this session as an example of something important, inspiring, with regards to how people are using this technology to strengthen the sustainability? Anything you would like to share with us?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting having been in blockchain and first in Bitcoin and then in like broader permission blockchain space for whatever 6 or 7 years now. It's interesting to see how we are shifting our attitude from this is really cool, let's just apply it to everything, to now, oh wait, actually, how can we make things better? And how can we leverage a new technology to fix problems that are just things that we've always struggled with? And I think that's something that really attracted me to general purpose blockchain and to all of the permission blockchain space, was looking at solutions around sustainability, around provenance tracking. Food supply chain is a big one, provenance of drugs as well, as in pharmaceuticals, and making sure that we can track those. So all of the things where we have a lot of actors that potentially can be competing with each other or wouldn't naturally trust each other, that now can collaborate on making the world a better place and solving for the general world issues. I would say that this is something, for instance, right now I'm working on a project with a company around sustainable food supply chain, and one of the things that they are building into their product is ability to microtip the farmers. So imagine buying a pack of your coffee and appreciating the fact that the coffee that you buy always comes from Joe the farmer, and Joe's story, and you can just like transfer 10 cents for every pack of coffee that you buy directly to Joe, and not to Sam who produces someone else's coffee, no, directly to Joe. I think that's really great because it brings the sense of kind of connection to your food, to your suppliers, and also gives you a sense of responsibility for whatever you're buying. And, of course, we are all told that we should be shopping local and getting supplies from our local farmers and so on. But effectively, it's not always possible. But being able to be connected to those food suppliers is very valuable. Similarly, when we look at energy consumption. One of the projects that I think I shared with you previously is done by a friend of mine who is working on creating solutions for people who want to get credits and want to build their credit scores, but are not in a traditional banking system. And what that company is doing is they are giving out solar panels that connect to the grid and kind of collect the energy and give it back to the grid in countries like Mexico and South Africa in general, where it's very sunny. So you put those panels in your garden or in your house, and then you can actually purchase tokens in the local grocery store that allow you to unlock some of the energy that those panels collect and use them for your house. So now by consistently purchasing those tokens and to use for your energy, you build out a credit score. You prove to the local cooperative bank that you're able to at least pay those whatever $2 a month for your energy supply, and that builds a credit score that then you can use for building your business. Another one is done by Kiwa. That's a fairly big project where you can apply for microcredit to build out your company. And it's a little bit like with crowdfunding, but here you fund particular businesses it's a completely nonprofit organization. You as a participant fund direct projects and direct micro-entrepreneurial stuff, if you will. And these people, once they raise their, 10K or whatever it is, build their business, they have to pay it back to the nonprofit that then utilizes for other people. So me, by providing whatever $50 to that system, I now can continuously, give money to various products and various projects and people who want to build their career. So I think that there is a lot of interest in really using this technology as something that allows us to build sustainable and very long-lived projects, rather than just solving for the most immediate issue, which is what usually machine learning or AI does. The difference between blockchain and any other modern technology for me is that there is a lot of focus on how can it actually change the world and make world a better place.
Yeah, I especially like the fact that you mentioned connecting the local with the global, which I think we have been suffering from for quite a while now. That as time goes by and our civilization, moves on, we as human beings are like, it feels like we are being more and more separated from one another. And I really love the farmer tipping example. But Wes, I would like to go back to you now, because I think in your position at the foundation, you see a lot of interesting, inspiring projects where at the intersection of social innovation, sustainability, and DLT, things are happening. People are really changing the world. What would you bring as inspiring, interesting examples for the audience to follow?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of different opportunities that we get to work on at the foundation, just because of the breadth of organizations we're working with. And in the sustainability area, it goes all the way from supply chain opportunities, where Suku is the example I mentioned, where the farmers are able to actually earn tokens for providing supply chain data that they otherwise wouldn't have access to. And it also has a benefit of higher transparency of that data, and they can take those tokens and maybe take them to a DeFi protocol and access liquidity, or so they can go buy more goods. That's one example. There's other folks like Dovu, Dovu.earth that are working with those farmers that I mentioned. And Dovu's actually taking the methodologies that normally live in the registries, and they're democratizing them in a way to take that calculation to work with local organizations and create carbon credits to sell in their marketplace, which launched yesterday. I really encourage folks to look at the different type of farm projects that are in both Bulgaria and the UK, and they're expanding. I know they're looking to expand every day, and I know they're working on a bunch of different projects around the world. And they're basically allowing farmers to follow a methodology and add extra steps in the process so that they capture additional carbon, and they get rewarded for that in the carbon offsets that they earn. And then as they're sold in Dobu's marketplace, they're able to get paid in a way that they formerly could not, but they also are actually helping sequester carbon. So it's helping the planet as well. And so it's a win-win where the farmers have access to liquidity, but also are taking actions that they otherwise wouldn't in a way that's durable. It's not going to go away over a year. It's something that usually is a 30+ year program. And they're able to make sure that they're capturing carbon and it's not having things like leakage where the farm next door is emitting carbon, in a way that could sometimes happen in certain types of projects. And so it's very publicly auditable, all done on Hedera. That's another way that we see a really big benefit. And we have folks doing the opposite of that, where they're actually accounting for emissions, not just capturing carbon. They may actually buy credits from companies like Dobu, or they may go to companies like FlexiDAO and say, hey, I want to measure, all the energy that I'm consuming, or maybe measure the renewable energy that I'm creating to show that I am actually proving carbon-free energy. And they're all doing that on Hedera. And just to piggyback off of what Marta was saying, they're actually doing this all with decentralized identifiers and identities, where they're every step along the way, both the devices and the organizations or the people involved have these identifiers that get credentials. And so whether it's an inverter that has a device that's been certified by another party, they're all following a process that's totally auditable on a public ledger that creates a tokenized economy and an exchange of value as we measure emissions or create offsets, or in the process of maybe even reporting farming data, they could actually be creating offsets as they're planting cover crops, but also reporting the cash crop information through companies like Suku. So we see a lot of great opportunities in our ecosystem, and just looking forward to seeing the community grow as it's already taken off so quickly.
I can just tell you, listening to you, I heard in the back of my head the word education, like coming back, because I just realized, how many of the things you mentioned are a novelty to people, not only on corporate side, but think about users. So events like European Blockchain Convention and the European blockchain school that Daniel and Victoria are building, I think are so needed, to bring this knowledge to people, teach them how to use this technology and build, easier access to wonderful things that all these teams are working on. And Simone, coming back to you, I mean, you've worked with some of the biggest brands, global brands with your technology and your DLT concept at FlexiDAO. What inspires you when you work with these big international brands, and what is interesting to mention, how they approach the topic of DLT at the intersection with sustainability?
Yeah, with a lot of complexity, they approach it. No, it's so I think that for us, it's I guess many can relate to that, but like our value proposition, even without blockchain, would need a lot of education. And convincing companies that actually measuring and tracking on an hourly basis is much more accurate when they can just not do it and be better off anyway. So generally speaking, it's hard, but at the same time, we started pitching this in late 2017, and it was 6 months ago that Google publicly announced its 24/7 carbon-free energy goal. It was like a game changer for us. Recently, now we're working, for example, with Microsoft, with a few other data centers, and I think one of the flagship projects we had is that Microsoft is procuring renewable energy from a offshore wind farm in the Netherlands for their data centers there, and actually we are creating NFTs that are backed both to the production metering data of the wind farm and the guarantees of origin that the actual Dutch regulator creates. And pegged to this, we are creating the NFT that then we use to track and prove to Microsoft that they're actually consuming, if they're consuming renewable energy every hour, because in the end, you're not green every hour. That's the hard reality. So I think that we are finally managing to bring blockchain and DLT to the energy sector in a way that actually makes sense and that is actually needed. And of course, there are a lot of challenges, right? Because I was saying before, the part of education, as you said, it's very important, and we're just getting started. But in the end, today we're very excited of having like companies like Vodafone, Microsoft, Google, Iron Mountain, right, really focusing on this and actually transacting on these hourly certificates. And I think it's just a matter of time that everybody will eventually agree, not just us blockchain nerds, that it is the best technology to do it. I think there's not even debate actually.
And I really loved how you brought NFT into this discussion down to the real utility level of what NFT is, because NFT for a lot of people today, it must be something, you know, art related, very, you know, sexy or very creative. In the end, it's just, you know, it's the utility that
absolutely
is the biggest value of
Dubu itself, it's an NFT marketplace in the end, right? I mean,
and Vas, I think what Simone said resonated with you because you've asked me here in the chat, you would like to add something to this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think focusing on NFTs here is important because this carbon that's being produced in case of brown energy, or in the case of green energy, where you're taking something like a wreck that's being created, is absolutely non-fungible. It's unique to the time. It's unique to a location. In the case of a carbon offset, we could have different attributes. I mentioned before, additionality or durability. How long is something being stored? Is it permanent or not so permanent? And is there going to be an attribute, you know, that maybe we want to account for, like leakage? Is saving something here causing, you know, for example, in the energy space, is consuming this energy, forcing someone to consume brown energy elsewhere? Is there some other effect that we want to measure? And every megawatt hour, in the case of Simone's work, you know, is non-fungible. And, you know, maybe the emissions might be a little bit fungible in the case of a specific site, but it gives us the opportunity to understand at a very granular level how things are matched together when we create these markets. And we've actually been doing a lot of research on how to match the supply and demand in the case of either energy or carbon offsets between semi-fungible or non-fungible assets. And we're working with a great company called Block Science, who's done fantastic work. Dr. Michael Zargom out of the University of Vienna, as an example on what we call the practical theory of fungibility, and really taking these really non-fungible assets that in the past we've had to treat as commodities, you know, for what they truly are, which is a non-fungible unique unit, and taking all the data that previously wasn't tied to them into a shareable format that is buyable and sellable with real liquidity. Because if we do it on a public ledger, of course, anyone can search for them, search by the metadata, just like you can search for a piece of art that may be green, brown, or blue. You can search for a megawatt hour if it's in Belgium, France, or Luxembourg. And you can decide, you know, well, I really, you know, going back to Simone's example, I don't want a renewable energy credit from Scandinavia if I'm not in Scandinavia. That doesn't make sense. If I want a renewable energy credit from my locality, if I'm in Barcelona, I should be able to get one. And that really matters in the case of offsetting. It makes it relevant. And it makes, you know, if we're matching hour by hour, it has to be non-fungible, because otherwise it's very difficult to pursue this. And so as we're doing this research, we're looking at how can we take concepts of matching these multiple attribute assets, which are non-fungibles together, or semi-fungibles to non-fungibles, and understanding how we can take concepts from DeFi to buy and sell and search these assets. And a lot of the work we're doing at Hedera and with the Guardian is taking attributes and capturing them in the workflow and creating these non-fungible outcomes in the form of tokens that are auditably linked for complete transparency of the asset to the data that's already on a public ledger, already surfaceable, understandable, and discoverable in a way that previously couldn't be done without blockchain. So Simone, to echo your comment, I really believe that this absolutely can't be done without blockchain. I would say without a public ledger. But I'd be curious to get your thoughts on fairness, because when we start to get to these assets that are being produced on chain, one of the things that we spend a lot of time on is understanding, well, how do we compete if it's a large corporation versus maybe me with a solar panel on my roof, and submitting a transaction and understanding, well, fairness of, you know, when I submit the transaction, do I have fair access to the ledger? Because not everyone understands blockchain and understands how to submit a transaction, especially in the utility space. But then how do I know that the transaction went in the right order? Or how do I know that I pay the right fee? And, you know, how do I know that my timestamp's unique? And, you know, a lot of blockchains have blocks that, you know, so a leader can manipulate the order. And how do we handle this? Maybe I'll, Marek, if you don't mind me directing a question to Simone, that's something that I'd be curious to get his thoughts on as well.
That's, I think, something that would lead us to a super interesting but very long discussion. And I'm looking at the timing here. We have 2 minutes before the end of the session, so I don't even want to open this, field. But it's very exciting, and I bet we can find a good platform to continue the discussion. But really, to close the session, there is a lot of noise about sustainability and ESG. This is good blockchain, this is bad blockchain, and you should not do this, you should not do that. And there are also a lot of fake announcements. Let's be honest. A lot of people are using this hype wave to deliver something that doesn't really work. How do you stay sober in this noise? How do you know where your true north is? Could you recommend to the listeners and the audience of this last panel of today's session anything, like a platform, a person, a speaker, or an event that they could follow to learn more and to build their own unbiased knowledge about the space and what's going on? And Marta, maybe I will ask you first.
I think just your own brain and reason, really. Don't follow anyone religiously, because people change their options and get disengaged, and there's so much movement that it's impossible to cover it all. I actually think that one of the next big things that need to happen is building a platform that aggregates all of the information and allows you to have like an objective overview of what is happening, but we don't have that really. So be cool and don't get crazy about any trends is my only advice, really.
Okay, Simone?
Yeah, maybe since Marta and Wes will mention a lot, can say a lot about blockchain, energy, which I think that for 99% of the world, it's just like turning on and off a switch, and what happens behind it's completely unknown, which is actually, I think, the most amazing machine that humankind has ever built, the power grid and the power market. So I usually listen to 2 podcasts, the Energy Gang and also MIT at Energy Initiative podcast, that I think give a nice, easy angle to whoever wants to understand. And I really also encourage everybody, when you contract a green tariff, why your sockets didn't change. The coal or nuclear or wind power plant that was next to your house didn't move. So what changed? And like really try to go a little bit deeper, go beyond the marketing, understand. And here I think these 2 podcasts could help you really understand how the environmental commodity market works behind, and really try to support companies that in the end are really building renewable energy where you are in your community. That's, I think, should be the ultimate goal. And understanding such a complex machine, I think these 2 podcasts could be helpful.
Thanks. And Wes?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of great areas to get information. But what I would say is focus on, especially within sustainability, focus on the outcomes that are happening and measurable in the real world that are fully auditable. A great example, we're going to go into this a little bit later today for folks who want to learn more about some of the applications on Hedera in the Twitter Spaces with Dovu.earth. So it's at Dovu Official or at the HBAR Foundation to join maybe a Twitter Spaces in a few hours. But look at the projects that are operating out there in the real world that are being very, very honest and open about the measurable outcomes. And look for things like listening to farmers, listening to utilities, and making sure that you can see their transactions out there in a publicly auditable way. That's the easiest way, is understanding the information for yourself and saying, wow, this is measurable, and not just a token, not just something that's being traded with a high price, but all the information out there behind that token and what went into it. And I think that's always a good way to understand the context around the assets that we're always talking about.
Amazing. So everyone else listening to us, feel free to follow these recommendations. If I could bring one last name before we disconnect, person that inspired me most in 2021 was probably Michael Saylor out of MicroStrategies, with great engineering insight into how distributed ledger works, and especially about Bitcoin. So I will hand over the voice to the studio now to Daniel, and thank you for your time, and thank you for this great session.
And we need a session to answer to Wes, eh?
Yes, yeah. We do.
Please.
We will book one for the next European Blockchain Convention.
Yes.
I promise you.
Okay.
Thank you, Marek. Thank you to all panelists for a wonderful discussion. We learned more stuff about sustainability, blockchain, how this links together. And I guess there's a lot more to talk about. That's why we left a little bit for next year. So thank you very much, Marek, for moderating and organizing the session. Also, Marta, yeah, so she's here, but I couldn't see her. So thank you once again. A little message to the audience. That was the last panel of this year's edition, last panel of European Blockchain Convention sessions. But now the plan is Victoria will join in a few seconds also to say goodbye, to wrap up this edition. And then we have prepared a little last minute session with all speakers. So we have sent an email to all speakers a few hours ago to join us for the last session. I don't know who will show up. I hope you four can join also. And let's see what they can, maybe we can talk about the outlook for the 2022. And yeah, so we will have a little party digitally in a couple of minutes. So I hope you can join us for a little while and see you in a bit.
See you in a bit. Bye-bye.